Hello, I'm Dustin Wunderlich, Communications Director for the University of Washington College of Education, and I'm pleased to be joined today by four education leaders who are current students or alumni of our Leadership for Learning program. With me to share their perspectives as education leaders during the COVID-19 pandemic are Trevor Greene, Superintendent of Yakima Schools, Kelly Niccolls, Learning Design Manager for Getting Smart, and Kate O'Brien, Principal of Hazen High School in Renton. So Trevor, what's one challenge that's emerged during the COVID-19 crisis and taken up a lot of attention in your role as an education leader?
Well, thank you, Dustin. I'm honored to be invited to be on this panel with both Kate and Kelly. I appreciate the opportunity to speak about the COVID pandemic and what it means in education. It's very difficult for us to talk per se about one issue. I think the biggest issue has been that we were not prepared for distance learning. We are a district in the Yakima Valley that is not a one-to-one district. Our students are made up of a demographic 80% Hispanic, Latinx, Native American, with a high poverty rate, and we had not made that transition. So making sure that we're getting up and running a system that can actually support and reaches every one of our students has been the biggest educational issue for us. However, we've also been plagued with making sure that our community is fed. All of our students, we're running a summer program that not only feeds our own students, but feeds anyone from ages 1 to 18 that are in our community. And then also getting childcare up and running for first responders and healthcare providers. So all of those by themselves are enormous issues, and yet you combine those along with all of the different intricacies, it becomes even more difficult.
Kelly, what thoughts do you have about that?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting in terms of the challenge, in addition to what Trevor's already shared, it's not only just an access around remote learning capacity, it's also just what actual learning is happening. So I think a challenge that's really surfaced is how can kids engage in actual learning that's meaningful, that matters, that can be presented and shared with teachers in ways that can present them feedback, that they have an understanding of what they're learning and how they're growing and progressing in their learning. And also, tending to social emotional needs. There's such a vast amount of support that schools provide that is now not accessible to students, and particularly in terms of that social realm and safety net of access of healthy adults and peers, and ways that they can check in and receive support. So that's also been a big challenge. And just how do we tend to our young people? How do we know that they're okay? How do they find places of refuge and solace, and just kind of understand where they are in the world and how they're progressing, over these next few months.
And Kate, how about your thoughts on this?
The only thing I would add is also supporting the adults in the system. So we quite clearly have major area of need for our students as far as the engagement in learning online in a format they've not been trained to learn in before. And we also have adults in the system who have not been trained to teach or deliver instruction this way before. And so it's been a huge leap forward, even for those of us who are in one-to-one school districts, who have the access to the hard technology to help our teachers figure out how they are going to deliver instruction in a meaningful way. And of course, like any comprehensive high school, we offer classes from swimming to welding to, advanced AP courses that students will have tests, coming up at the end. And so it's been a major piece of our work to, be flexible, responsive, and to also just lower those anxiety levels for our educators that are doing their very best to pivot and change and provide meaningful learning activities for our students. So it's twofold in the people who we are supporting right now as well.
So Kelly, there's a lot of concern about how students, especially our most vulnerable students, are going to be faring during these extended school closures. What's one strategy that you're pursuing to attend to issues of equity right now?
Yeah, well, I think one is just letting go of this, now students are not faring well. They haven't been faring well. Our marginalized students have been marginalized in the education system this entire time. This is just a new form of marginalization that's become apparent. So I think that's just one important clarification in this dialogue around, equity and access is, equity and access has been an issue even when we were back in our buildings and all sharing space and having a more traditional learning experience. I also think it's important to this idea of being behind, behind from what? We're all in very, disjointed and dysfunctional learning experiences, class to class, school to school, district to district, state to state. So it's not that there's like this one group of people who are getting continuous, reflective, high quality learning very efficiently or pronouncedly compared to, all of the other districts and states in the country. So I think what I'm really focusing on is just how are communities, how are districts, how are schools tending to their children, checking in, ensuring that they're okay, that they have the resources that they can get, that they are taking advantage of opportunities to learn and engage, maybe without formalized curriculum and content that the school delivers, but what are some strengths and opportunities that students are experiencing outside of the school? And then I think really how are we tending to our adult faculty around development and training so that when students do come back to the fall, how can we assess where they are in their learning journeys? What are their immediate needs? How can we adjust curriculum? How can we create schedules and circumstances to best receive those students back and promote them to another step, whatever that step might be? I'm hopeful that, the way that we progress in learning over the next couple of months and years will look really different in response to the disruption that this pandemic has had.
Mm-hmm. Trevor, what's your perspective like in Yakima and something that you're doing there in response to this?
I appreciate Kelly's comments about the inequities that have always existed, and it's not just about digital inequity. I think what has happened is actually daylit all of the inequities that are existing in our system. When we talk about computer access, for example, there are several that already have advantages and have supported family life and have internet and access to AP classes and other opportunities that don't exist for our students. But Kelly also talked about the social emotional component. And when we're talking about those that are suffering most, we have to make sure that we are not forgetting the mandates, the expectations that have come forth through our governor, through our superintendent of public instruction, because those center around childcare, food service, providing education. But what they don't specifically call out is what are we doing to address the social emotional components to assure that our children are okay, that our families are okay, and that our community is okay. So when we think about opportunities that exist in reaching everyone, it is a daunting task, as Kate expressed, when our educators are learning to teach in an online setting, in a distant learning setting, and our administrators are doing something totally new, for us to proceed and try to address this as a district or as a school is really swimming upstream. And what we have to do is really engage our entire community. So together, if we can reach out to local partners, other entities that are perhaps providing similar services or looking to fill in and support in different ways, then we can actually bring our community together and address all of the issues that we have around the needs of our students versus trying to do them separately.
Mm-hmm. And Kate, in Renton, what is maybe something that you're doing there to attend to these issues of equity?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is frustrating to recognize is that the systems that we have built to keep students oppressed and marginalized are extremely resilient. And so even though we are living through, the vast majority of us, our first worldwide pandemic, and entire systems are completely closed, shuttered, people not going to work, participating, in all activities that they normally would. There continue to be these systems in education that want to other students and keep them, honestly, from achieving at the same levels as their white socioeconomic and able-bodied peers. And so I think that for me, one of the daily activities that I'm doing is just participating in conversations around innovation, because we cannot continue to do the work that we've always done in the way that we've always done it in a pandemic and anticipate that any outcomes are going to change, let alone improve. They are not. And we cannot have future conversations about an opportunity gap when we are putting into place, choosing daily to put in barriers that are keeping some of our students from achieving at this point. We're actually creating new barriers right now as opposed to eliminating them moving forward. That's extremely frustrating, and it's going to take a lot of leadership in districts across the state to address some of those issues.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like to turn now to what you're doing as school system leaders to prepare for the eventual reopening of our schools. And Kate, maybe we can start with you. What are you doing right now in thinking forward to that?
Yeah, I think a big piece of this is that managing the present well is going to pave the way for a smooth future. We are obviously going to make some mistakes here and there. We've never done this before, but it's really important for us right now to be connecting with kids, connecting with families, making sure we don't lose them, making sure they are going to come back, making sure that if they do have to move or if they do lose access to stable housing, that we are doing everything that we can to still keep them within our, within our neighborhoods, within our school districts, and provide them resources here. Because our biggest goal is that they come back. That's what we want to happen. We want all of our kids back. We want them safe. We want them healthy, and we want them to continue learning forward with us. And so I think that a huge piece is doing well now. In addition to that, we are, there's so much unknown, as we all know. We don't know what coming back looks like. We don't know when coming back could potentially happen. And so what that means is it's plans on plans. It's plan A, B, C, and D for all the potential options that could be happening, including small group learning, A day, B days, different ways to use buildings across the school district, different ways to use facilities in order to meet our needs, whatever those will be when we come back. And honestly, also helping people mourn the loss of the things that we're not going to do. And that is pretty major right now. So you have to think that students across the country did not get to participate in, activities, athletics, concerts, things that they've trained for years of their life, competitions. Graduation obviously is going to be majorly impacted. So helping people mourn the loss of those things and thinking about if we are entering a fall situation where that could also be the case, what are we going to do differently? How are we going to address some of those things instead of just saying like, we're really sorry this happened and we can't move forward?
Mm-hmm. Kelly, some of the uncertainty that Kate just mentioned, what are your thoughts about how school system leaders can be preparing for the return to more normal operations?
I think it's also maybe letting go of the more normal operations and helping people return or to come back. Even saying that, like, we don't even know if students will even go back to a building that they've been to before. So I guess it's how do we best hold people on this journey as we figure out where our next steps are and what the new circumstances will be and how we'll engage in that space together and collectively so that people feel cared for, that students have a clear sense of communication and know in the compartmentalized timelines that we live in right now, they know kind of how to navigate that space. They know the resources that are available to them. So I think that's important as a leadership move right now, just as Kate had said, is just really nurturing in the moment to build that trust so people come along with you as we really navigate some very uncertain times. And I think it's also, imperative for leaders right now to ensure that we don't subside to that pressure to return back to a normalcy, to return back to those systems that we've already discussed have blatantly harmed and are inconsiderate of a nuanced future like that aren't bearing pandemics, and thinking about just what does it mean to continue to live through this world and through our current economic circumstances? What does it really mean to be career and college ready? These are important questions that leaders need to grapple with. They can't ignore them in the minutia of the work that we're in. And so it's really, how do they toggle both of those very pressing needs of thinking ahead and also very much holding the space that we're currently in. And that we can redesign and re-enter a new phase of what it means to teach and learn in U.S. schools.
Mm-hmm. And Trevor, in Yakima, how are you approaching this in thinking ahead to resuming in-person instruction?
I appreciate the comments that Kate shared about living in the now and embracing the moment. I think that is the first thing, is to recognize that we are in a time that is unprecedented in our history, and we are living in a state of flux, which is a good thing to reiterate and state and share with our community and with our workforce, with our teachers, with our principals. The thing that I think is very important during this time is to continually communicate where we are and the changes that are taking place. That is something that we can control. We can control our messaging. We can tell our own narrative. We can let people know that changes are going to happen and continue to happen and be frequent and ongoing. The other challenge in this time is planning for a future that when we don't know what the expectations will be. Will we be able to return in a way that we have prior? Will social distancing be implemented? What does that mean? Kate talked about AB days, alternates, all kinds of ideas are out there. And for this reason, I think it's also important to reach out legislatively and to talk with leaders at the level of OSPI, Chris Reichdahl, our current superintendent of public instruction, and his team, to get clarity around what they see, because the wasted time in planning for an unknown future is challenging. But if there is a way to kind of reduce the guesswork and have a menu of options A, B, C for returning, and what they may recommend and what the governor may recommend, then that becomes easier to plan around. But I think the important thing to keep in mind, as was shared by Kelly, is that perspective of returning to the sameness that we had before. This has provided a wonderful opportunity, if you visualize education as a rubber band, to stretch out that rubber band. And if we let go, it's going to go back to the same shape that existed previously. What we have to do is be engaged in conversations, in think tanks, in communicating with our community and educational leaders and legislative leaders to know where to put the pegs in place so that we can kind of keep the form that has existed and do what is benefiting students from an equity lens, and then maybe bring back what existed previously that was working. So for us to now move forward in this current state is I don't believe we're always going to be in this current state, but returning fully to what existed prior. If we do that in education, then we have failed as leaders, because there are so many good things that are happening from this that we can't afford to now toss them back out and return to what existed prior. And that goes back to communication. It's not only with the people that I mentioned, but internally, frame this for your workforce, frame this with our labor unions, involve our teachers in this process, because there are great things that are happening, and there are people that don't want this to return to what it was prior, but there are also people that would love to have everything back the same way that it was previously.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about that opportunity that exists for our school systems, Kelly, thinking beyond the immediate response to the pandemic here, what's one change you think that this crisis will motivate our school systems to pursue to better serve our students and families?
I'm hopeful around energy. I'm hearing around competency and standard-based assessments. I'm eager to see a change be not so much the subjectivity of content and grade levels and curriculum, but really focusing on core competencies, core standards of learning that are whole child-centered, transcendent of a workforce future readiness, that transcend across grade levels and really look at child development, child interests, personalized opportunities, differentiation opportunities, multiple modalities in which students can engage with learning. resources and with learning communities. I think that's one significant change that I would really hope holds as we're seeing the need for agility in time and space and locale for our students to continue to learn in uncertain times, but even in more normalized times. There's clearly a revelation that our students have a variety of strengths and needs and differentiated accesses that we've been talking about in our current or in our old structures, that we don't have to replicate those obstacles, and we can remove those barriers and remove those structures in ways that really liberate students to be part of learning communities and a timeline of learning and development that's much more relevant and useful for them as they grow into the future.
Mm-hmm. Kate, what are your thoughts about something that this crisis could motivate our school systems to change or look at going into the future?
Yeah, I'd say two things. First, to go back to the adults in the system, I'm just so encouraged around the adult learning that I have seen, the rapid adult learning that I have seen to adjust to our current situation. You know, the old system, professional development is great, and oftentimes we are, you know, just depending on teacher or adult interest to buy into some of the initiatives that we believe are best for kids. Problem-based learning or project-based learning, you know, the implementation of tech in the classroom or integration of technology in the classroom. Some of those big rocks that really can support differentiated learning, as Kelly is talking about, have been optional. And at this point, they're not. Because if you are going to survive in the system and you're going to continue to teach in the system, you have had to adjust very quickly to what's happening. And I am so excited about the just commitment that I have seen from adults in the system to do that well and to do that really with, you know, student-centered decision-making in mind. It's been super encouraging to watch adults go through that process. And secondly, I would say, you know, systems-wide from the state level and from the federal level is about budgets and allocations of our finances and how we determine we're spending money at the per pupil level, you know, at the basic ed level, deciding you know, what and how schools should be funded is going to have to change. It has to. We cannot continue in the model that we're in and support schools and students with the type of learning that's going to need to be done to recover from this. So I'm looking forward to engaging in some of those conversations and seeing, again, the innovation that can play out around our budget systems.
Mm-hmm. And Trevor, what change or innovation do you see really being driven by the current crisis?
Well, I appreciate the comments of both Kelly and Kate, and I wish I had the optimism of Kate around the budget components, because I really don't see how things will be changed around budgetary issues. The inequities that exist financially from district to district in our state are so ingrained, and it's, you know, represented obviously within the legislative districts, that for that to become equitable across our system would be beyond what I'm capable of dreaming at this point. And I hadn't even thought about that, because I found myself recognizing, as you spoke, Kate, that wow, wouldn't that be something? And I can't imagine what that would be like. So I do hope that that comes to fruition. And I concur totally with Kelly on her perspective of what it would look like with barriers eliminated within the walls of the schoolhouse, being able to have things based on competency, achievement based on competency, and not being in a classroom being bound by time and structure that way. So I think what I would add is the importance of continuing on with the communication and the equity focus that has been brought to the forefront during this time. So having a workforce in education, we know that the teaching workforce is primarily middle class and white. It does not represent the students that we have in many of our communities. And yet, when people work from their own reality, they impose a standard upon others that exists in their experiences. And what this has done for us, this reality that we're facing, is forced people to meet our students in their areas of residence, in their realities, online or in the parking lot when they're trying to access internet so that they can do assignments. These stories are out there now. The realities are existing with our own families, and they cannot be ignored. And so to build upon the realization that, the things that we read about in research studies and that we hear about in other places, these are happening in our communities. And it is our job at the district level to make sure that that conversation continues, and that the opportunity to continue in conversations and fixing the inequities that exist are now right here at our fingertips, because people are seeing things that they had never seen before or forgotten about in their years of teaching or years in administration. So I think that communication piece combined with what my colleagues presented are hopes that I would have for the future.
Well, Kelly, Trevor, and Kate, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate you sharing your insights and perspectives as education leaders.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and thank you.
All right.